Hi everyone, and welcome back to Project No Buy. In today's video, we're going to be reacting to some videos, kind of, and talking about how the ultimate self-care is actually not buying stuff. So this is going to be an interesting format because I'm actually not going to be watching the TikToks with you here, and instead I'm going to be delivering my rant and finding the TikToks that I'm referring to mentally, the ones that I haven't yet seen, and showing them on screen alongside the relevant points, hopefully. We'll see how this works. I'm hoping that by not referring to the specific creators, I will avoid the personal attacks. I'm not attacking a particular creator or person in general here, and not being too nitpicky by delivering my general concepts supported by examples from the greater community at large. Let's see how this works. I've talked in the past few videos about how every few months or, as this journey progresses, I feel like the layers of anti-consumerist intentions are getting peeled away, or, I'm getting closer to the bedrock of anti-consumerist intentions, rather, peeling away the consumerist conditioning that I've received all my life thus far from society at large, the influences all around me. And I have concluded recently, as of late, maybe after my latest declutter in terms of sending a bunch of clothes away to consignment to be sold, and paring down my makeup collection, and reading my books and letting them go, and all the things that I've been doing for the past 2 years very publicly on this channel, I've concluded that the ultimate self-care, one of the ultimate forms of self-care, is not buying stuff. Now, contrary to the depictions of self-care that we are presented with so often on popular media, where it involves so many products, so many things, so many lotions and potions to slather on, so many products and gizmos and gadgets and miracle solutions, miracle balms, and retail therapy, the high of the haul, the shopping to cure any ailment from boredom to loneliness to feeling dissatisfied with our appearance. All of this results in more pain. And by pain, I'm using that to refer to the fallout of shopping too much or shopping more than we actually need. These are ranging from obvious things, right? Like spending all of our money, spending money that we could have used towards something else, towards something more fulfilling, to having a cluttered space and then having to spend the time decluttering, and if we're so inclined, responsibly rehoming our things. Ideally not throwing them in the trash and filling up the landfills, although that can be a repercussion if we do so, if we dispose of our things in that way, if we treat our goods as disposable in that literal sense. So when I see things like the social media trends of the Burr baskets, the Boo baskets, the Easter baskets even, the baskets full of stuff, the baskets to give your friends, the baskets that people give their bridesmaids, I feel like now, with my new way of seeing, that I see the burden of all that stuff, the strain on that, not that relationship per se, but the guilt and the obligations that then loads you with as a receiver, or, to some extent, if you're the one giving the stuff as well, finding all the stuff, making sure it's nice enough, making sure the basket is full enough, making sure that you source things that they're gonna like, the posting of it online and making it look aesthetic if that's part of it as well. But then for the person receiving all the goods, they now have to find a use for all these things that, if it's something that they actually like, they probably already had one of. Now, there may be some exceptions if you're a parent giving your kids something that they don't already have. Every kid at some point is going to get their first pair of shoes or their first new pack of underwear in their size, or, there's things that kids legitimately need. If they don't have a lip balm, you might know because you're the one providing all the goods and resources for their lives. And so if you make an Easter basket and put a lip balm in it, maybe that's not so bad. But if you're doing this for friends, for coworkers, for bridesmaids, for adults who buy their own stuff, even teenagers who curate the stuff in their own lives, you are then giving them another option that they have to cycle through to use up before it expires. If it's a cosmetic product or a clothing product, that's another item that they have to use in order to make it worth keeping. And if they don't find a use for it, or they don't find it worth keeping, if they don't actually like it, then they've got to find a way to dispose of it, or to use it in ways that honors the relationship, like wearing your grandma's sweater that she gifted you over Christmas on the few visits that she has, and then keeping it in your closet for the rest of the year, That's kind of the old version of that. But, it then burdens the receiver of these gifts that they may or may not have a use for with that decision of, do they keep it, or do they try to find a way to show you that they're using it disingenuously? There were some of these baskets in particular, the winter season baskets, that always had a blanket and slippers in them. And if the person you're giving it to already has a blanket and slippers, that just becomes one more pair of slippers, one more blanket. Sometimes what might happen is they get rid of their old one before it's time. And, move the cycle on of consumerism, making these use value times shorter and shorter. The planned obsolescence of it all kind of creeps in, even though the product itself isn't designed that way. If you get rid of your shoes before they've truly worn out, you are creating and perpetuating that cycle of planned obsolescence. And I do think that society has conditioned us to be like this by making the thrill of buying something new, the allure of having the new thing so powerful to the examples that we see around us, that we're tempted to say, oh, these are a little bit worn, I need to get a new one now, or it's not bad if I let this one go, in favor of getting a new one. Whether it's because it's worn out a little bit and shows that sign of age and patina, or because there's a new trend and suddenly the red shoes aren't good enough. You have to have the baby pink ones, or whatever the color swap of the season has been. And then we also have, bizarrely, the consumerist trend of minimalism, where it's become elevated, become desirable to have simple spaces, simple living, not a lot of stuff cluttering up your life. And so, first of all, if that is something you aspire to, anything you bring into your life, whether it's a gift, whether it's something you buy for yourself, is taking you away from that simplicity. And so to care for yourself, that's one avenue, right, of not accumulating stuff to go for that minimalist space. However, that simplicity has also been commodified. And so by consuming those ideals that we may or may not resonate with ourselves, or may or may not reach naturally, we're also perhaps discounting our own instincts or our own levels of comfort, or, not listening to our own ideas, our own goals, in favor of the goals society is projecting onto us. And so once again, to engage in self-care, more authentic self-care, we wouldn't always be listening to the ideas that society is showing on these very consumer-centric platforms. They will find a way to sell you that simplicity and that minimalism. They'll have the list of essentials that every minimalist has. And yes, there'll be perhaps more videos of things minimalists don't buy, but there will still be that showcase of the must-haves for the minimalist aesthetic or minimalist lifestyle. One other thing that I read about in the books Biology and Brandwashed by Martin Lindstrom is how data mining is making privacy a hot commodity. And lo and behold, have you seen the sponsorships for the videos with the VPNs or the whatever it is, the data services to protect your identity? I can't even think of the names off the top of my head because A, I've stopped watching as much online content, and B, I actively tune out when the sponsor segments come on. But they've even commodified the desire for internet privacy. And to some degree, maybe there are some services that help with this when, if you're online at all, it's inevitable or it's difficult to avoid the broaches on privacy. I'm not saying that these services are invalid or not useful, but it is just kind of ironic that by participating in the system, we have created a problem that then can be fixed with the purchase of this other service. And so somebody is benefiting somewhere from these negative consequences, the data breaches, the privacy compromises. Somebody out there has found a way to capitalize on that as well. Also in those books, it was discussed how recommendations from people allow us to turn off our brains. And this ranges from the professionals, the celebrities, the doctors, the health professionals in other capacities, to influencers, to people like us. And so when these people talk about products, services, things that they do, things that they like, they come on with their hauls. It allows us to shut our brains off a little bit and engage in the primal urges of see it, want it, buy it, because we've had a recommendation, because we trust somebody else's opinion over our own, arguably. And this is not self-care either. Engaging in this recommendation feedback loop, in addition to the actual purchase of these things, which then leads to those ailments of the clutter, the unhealthier finances, the dissatisfaction in our souls, the decision fatigue with too many options, all these things, all these negative consequences of too much stuff. It's not even just that. It's also just the mental space, the respect for our own ideas and thoughts and feelings that kind of gets pushed to the side when we're constantly consuming these recommendations from other trusted sources and turning off our own minds and our own critical thinking. Ironically, Martin Lindstrom, the author of Biology and Brandwashed, also started his books or his journey there with a no-buy, which he ultimately failed as well. And as I'm continuing to learn through books like No Logo, brands are not actually manufacturers of products. They are, as Naomi Klein writes, more of a collective hallucination. They create this landscape, this image of what we want to be, and they define who we want to become, and they offer that to us through the purchase of whatever it is they're selling. And we are so often led by the choices and behavior of others. Human brains are also made to connect patterns and sequences that aren't actually there, and come to conclusions that aren't necessarily valid. So that whole cycle of see it, want it, buy it, become like that person, the fantasy self, the aspirational self, this celebrity has this, so therefore if I get it, I will be cool or like them. This doctor recommends this supplement, so therefore if I get it, I'll be healthier, I'll be more like them, or I'll be following some much needed advice in order to become a better version of myself. These are making connections and conclusions that aren't actually real. They're manufactured. They're not coming from our own wants and needs and desires. They're all manufactured and a result of what we've seen in society. It's pure influence, pure engineered influence. And these companies know what they're doing. And to some extent, these influencers do as well. And even if they don't, they're still participating in the system that leads to this kind of unconscious consumerism. So anyway, the ultimate self-care is actually not buying stuff. And it's not even me here delivering the messages of minimalism for the sake of simplicity or the sake of having a beautiful, curated space. It's through multiple lenses. The simplicity, the health of finances, the minimizing of exploitation to people on Earth and the Earth's resources in itself. It's about fully considering the true cost of everything that we buy or bring into our lives. The reframing of Project No Buy as an act of self-care as well as gentle resistance in terms of the forces acting upon us outside of ourselves. It's both an internal and an external project, in other words. Let me know if you like this video format. It's a new one for me. I am curious to see how it works, if it does work. And feel free to share anything else you would like to in the comments below as well. Other acts of self-care you practice in your own life, perhaps. Alright, with that, I will say bye for now, and see you in the next one.